Good morning, welcome back to another video. It's autumn, yeah. I think we're at peak colour. Second week in November, so I've taken a day to come down to the Valley de Hoegne, which I always pronounce incorrectly. Apologies to my Belgian friends. But we've got really good light and beautiful autumn colours, so I'm going to take for a walk down the river and let's see what we can get. Well, this is a spot I photographed a couple of years ago, and it was really a little gem hidden away. I really enjoyed it, but a couple of years back I was shooting with the Lumix G cameras. Today things have progressed and I've got my Lumix S1R with me, and it's the first real test I think I'm going to put it through for some longer exposure time photography. So I'm going to try and use my Lee little stopper, maybe even the big stopper, and I also want to try the high resolution mode on the camera as well. So I've just got two lenses with me today, the Canon 16-35 f2.8, and I'm going to use the Sigma MC21 adapter for that, and then I've got the Lumix L Mount 24-105, and that's more of an all-round general purpose lens. Well, I've already had some pretty good results with that. I've got my boots on, so there are some areas, although it looks like the river's pretty full, there are some areas that are relatively shallow. I can get my feet, metaphorically speaking, wet, but yeah, it's a beautiful location here. Well, coming up to the first outlook, it's not a point where I'm going to stop to take a photograph, but I'll show you on the video a little bit what we're talking about. So when I was last here about 2 years ago, this was the first spot that I shot. We've had a lot of rainfall the past couple of weeks, and so the water is a lot higher. I'm very tempted to try and get it again, but it looks quite deep. I'll just show you behind me. There's a rock, and I use that as foreground interest, but I think if I go in there today I'm going to get very wet. So I'm going to go head up upstream a little bit more, because I think it shallows out a little bit more. So I've set up a composition here. I'm not entirely convinced about it, but I wanted to just test out my camera, get an indication of the light settings. As I mentioned before, the rainfall has really raised the river level. Here I could go in, but I've decided not to, because I've got this little vantage point. There's actually the main river and a small tributary coming together here. And I've got a little bit of light in the sky, so I've actually just punched in a little bit with the zoom lens. And I've got a couple of rocks in the foreground here, but I'm not entirely convinced, because you've kind of got the river at an angle, and I'd actually prefer to have it head on. So yeah, I've got my Circular Polariser on, my 6-stop little stopper, and I've had to push the ISO a little bit higher, about 8 seconds, and the result's pretty good in terms of the exposure on the white parts of the water, which is something you always have to take care of. Using a exposure time that's too long will basically blow that highlight out, so you've got to kind of balance that with the ISO. And I'm about f7.1, and I ideally like to be at 8 or above. But the sun's coming up over the trees. In a few minutes I'm going to get a lot more light on this scene. So you know you're in the midst of autumn when you come into a forest area and you see these guys on the floor. Let me show you. So one of the things I think is interesting to talk about, excuse me whilst I look at my footing because I'm walking over rocks, is whether or not to take an image. Just as I try and create content, I do consume it as well. And there's a lot of landscape photographers and wildlife photographers that I like and respect and enjoy watching what they do. It's great inspiration, and yeah, I learn a lot from it. But one of the things that I always scratch my head at is when, specifically for landscape photographers, they do all the hard work of getting out of bed at the crack of dawn. Then, let me just look at this, wow. Let me just break my monologue to show you this. Yeah, stunningly beautiful. And we're getting sun come through. As I was saying, one of the things that I always find incredible, scratch my head at, is when landscape photographers will do the hard work of getting out of bed, come to a location, and then for whatever reason they don't take the image because the conditions aren't perfect. I just took my first image there, and yeah, I mean, it wasn't really what I wanted. I couldn't get the image I wanted, or at least the composition, but it didn't stop me from shooting, because I always think that if you get yourself here, if you get yourself to the location, try. I'm humble enough, I think, to recognize the difference between saying, oh well, you know, all the stars haven't aligned and therefore I can't get the perfect image I want. That's really not my philosophy. My philosophy is get out there and try and create an image under all the conditions. I think it makes you a better photographer. Having said that, I've just spotted a scene. I'm going to put this camera down and get my other camera out because this has potential. So this is where sometimes you see a scene and it's like incredible and you're like wow, and then trying to photograph it is a big challenge. So I first of all started to look, if you look down here, started to look at foreground interest. There's actually quite a lot of frost here, which is interesting. I've got these two trees that have fallen across the river. I've got a very tall tree on the right, and I've got pine forest in the background, but the sun is behind those trees, so I've got some contrast in the sky. So I'm using a polarizer, little stopper. I've got a soft ND grad as well, but it's not cutting or not holding the sky back as much as I would like. So I'm going to try a couple more tricks with the camera and see if I can get something out of it, but it's a beautiful scene. I just don't think it's going to make a good photo. So I'm going to move on and head up to the next spot. And I was right, it didn't make a good photo. So after my rant about trying to make and create an image, no matter what I tried, I couldn't make this spot work. I thought that the tree line would be in my favour, but in fact the rising sun was just too bright for a workable image. I was left with a 1:1 crop just for the purposes of the video, which left out the lone tall tree, which is what originally drew me to the composition. So my lesson was learnt. So I'm actually in the water now, and yeah, I've got the sun that's come above the trees, and of course now I've got glare on the water, and the glare is actually stronger than the polarizer. But what actually is happening is, because I've got the trees on the bank, I've now got the shadows of the trees that are actually creating a fan, so it's quite effective. And I've just been stood here for a few minutes trying to get an image, trying to get my settings right, and I'm pretty happy with it actually, given the conditions. It's a nice image, it's a beautiful scene, and I'm going to keep wandering up and hopefully get to a section where the glare on the water is probably a little bit less, I'm hoping. Actually there's a bend to the right there. If not, I'll try and cross over at a low point and get over to the other side, because I think shooting into that direction, to my right, there'll be less glare. So ISO 250, f9, 3.2 seconds, I've got a lovely image. Okay, so the good news is I found the first bridge behind me, so I've been able to cross over. The sun is behind me over here, and so now I've got the river in shadow, so I'll keep walking up. But I'm actually going to try and take an image just in this area of the bridge. Add some nice interest. And there's a really large rock a little bit downstream. So the good news is I can just put my bag just on this side area, and it's relatively shallow, so I don't have any issue to actually walk down there. I don't know if you can see, let me show you. You've got a lot of the leaves that have fallen from the trees and they actually gather behind the rocks, which is kind of interesting. And what I'd really like to get is I'd like to get a rock with some autumn leaves on as a foreground interest and anchor, and that's proving a little bit challenging to find. But apart from that, it's still a beautiful day to be out. Plenty of compositions to be had, just got to find them. So I'm in the middle of the river. As I said, I was able to cross the bridge. I've now got the light to my left side as I look upstream. And I've been working a little bit over there on a couple of rocks as a foreground anchor, and now I've come back and I'm taking an image in landscape orientation. I'm going to flip it to portrait orientation as well, because I actually want to get some of the height on the trees. But now the light's just stunning. Yeah, the scene is beautiful. I love having the bridge there. It really gives some interest. Yeah, just a great day. And I'm just looking over here, there's beautiful colours. I'd love to get over there and use those leaves as some foreground interest, but actually down there it's super deep, so I'm not going to risk it. But I'm just going to get my image here, and yeah, then I'll keep heading up the pathway and see what else I can get. Yes, I'm on f10, ISO 250, 6 seconds, little stopper, polarizer, got the shot, really happy with it. I'm going to flip it now to a portrait orientation, try and get some height on those trees, the sun which is really lighting up the colours, give it another image with an extra dimension. So I've just come to a second bridge, and yeah, I'm fighting the light again. So I've crossed over the bridge, which is good. I don't know if you can see it, because I'm shooting on the GoPro, so it's a little bit behind me. With a wide angle you may not see it. And what drew me to this spot was that actually, let me turn and show you. Yeah, you can see I'm under these beautiful colours, and I wanted to try to use those colours actually as some, just here, foreground interest. Yeah, it's quite a challenging composition to master, because you can see like I'm under branches and twigs, and then my tripod, if you look here, it's like super precarious. One foot is kind of on the edge here, this is pretty much straight, this one's at an angle, and then I've got most of the weight of the lens coming down here. So yeah, it's a challenging situation. And I've gone a lot wider than I thought. I really wanted to kind of zoom in on those, zoom in on those leaves, but it didn't look balanced to me. So I've kind of come out, sort of gone much wider, and the resulting image I'm a lot happier with. so I'm back in the river, and this is going to be my last image for the day. I've walked right to the end of the path, or the trail, and I've actually hit private property, so I'm going to have to turn around and go back. But what an amazing last image. Let me show you. So, beautiful autumnal colours and some interesting foreground interest. So I have two rocks, so I've come back a little bit. Two rocks, one on the left, one on the right, one rock in the middle. That's got a lot of debris. We've got this lovely overhang here with these brown leaves, and then the trees and the canopy of trees on both sides. You've got some beautiful light coming from the right, so you've got a part that's a little bit illuminated with beautiful golden colours. Further down the river, there's some area that's a little bit overexposed, but that's far enough away for me to deal with. And then you've just got this beautiful colour on the left side. So it's a very, let me just take a look. Yeah, it's a very busy composition, a lot going on, but I like it a lot. And there's a really nice symmetrical element. I think a lot of landscape photographers that are much better than I am always talk about balanced compositions. This one for me feels very, very balanced. And I'm just going to play a little bit again with the focal length, just to make sure that I don't have any distracting elements in the final image. But overall, it's been a great day. And yeah, I'll leave you with this scene and the images, and then I'll head back to the car. So I'm just getting back to the car. I hope you liked today's video. If you did, please give it a like and leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and yeah, you can come back for more photographic videos based on landscape, nature and wildlife photography. See you next time.